Hi, my name is Dr. Erin Kincaid with Higher Hopes Institute. If you found yourself here, you're in the Wounded Parent class, session 1. I don't know if you are a wounded parent. I don't know if you're a loved one of a wounded parent, or maybe you're a class or group facilitator, but I'm happy you're here all the same. If you happen to be a wounded parent, I know how you're feeling. I understand the pain, the panic, the restructuring of everything in your life, the PTSD-like symptoms, maybe even some PTSD symptoms, depending on the severity of the loss and the trauma you're experiencing. I know what it feels like to not sleep and not eat, to try to fix it and also try to cover it up, to be ashamed and embarrassed by what your child has done all the time, all the while still trying to love them and love them well, fighting for them and trying to be an authority, a healthy authority in their life, trying to point them back to God while they're consistently and avidly rejecting everything you seem to have taught them or everything your family has been about all these years. I've been there. And I know exactly how hard it is to wait and to watch and to trust that the Lord is sovereign, to trust that He is in charge, to trust that He loves them more than we could ever imagine. That's a really hard space, but I've been there. I'm on the tail end of a phase of that, I think. Maybe not. We're not really sure. We think we're getting back on space or on target, I should say, back into our space. But it's a very difficult time. It's a time of immense trust while immense worry, because these children who we would literally impale ourselves for, who we would take a bullet for, who we would lay down our lives for, as Christ has asked us to do, and how, if you really think about the decades we spent living for them, loving them, caring, sacrificing, giving up for them, it was a form of laying down our life, and now they're rejecting us, maybe abandoning us, maybe saying everything that we believe in and what we're about no longer resonates with them. Sometimes it's rebellion. We hear that in a prodigal son situation, and sometimes it is rejection and the abandonment of truth or the truths that you've held evident and clear and dear all of these years. No matter where you're from, no matter what the walk is, I'm here to walk you through what I think is really valuable information on how we wander well. Ellen Harbin is a wonderful Christian author of the Stand series and Stand conferences, and she teaches on wandering well. So this is an act of wandering well. Thank you, Ellen, who I'm sure will watch this at some point. And we are called to wander well in this time. We are called to figure out what it means to wander well, which means we have to dissect, dig up, flush out all the different components of everything we've been going through. So as I take you through this course, there are 3 sessions I'm going to lead you in, because I don't know if I'm speaking to a person, a couple, a pair of parents, or a group. I'm actually going to toggle back and forth with language that makes sense to both groups. So stay tuned. You're not in the wrong place if you hear me leading or talking to a facilitator at this time. You can apply the same things, and I'm going to give you the different activities for each situation that I think we might be in going through this class together. So first, I would just like to offer up a short prayer. If we could just take a moment to breathe, relax our shoulders, loosen up that jaw. You know, if you need to put your shoulders up and shoulders down just to really get some airspace in those lungs, and try to unclench from the pain and the suffering and the struggles and the trial and the travesty of it all. Let's just take ourselves to the Lord in a short prayer and prepare our hearts for this time together. Father God, I thank you. I thank you that I'm allowed to even teach this material, that I live in a country where I can bring Christian ideals and Christian truth to people who are searching. Lord, I thank you for the families that are represented on the other side of the screen, wherever they may be, whatever part of their journey they find themselves in. I thank you that I get to be a part of it, even if it's just digitally. Let my words be your words. Let them hear only you, not me. Less of me, more of you, that I may decrease and you may increase in their hearts, in their heads, in their souls, Father. And would you please guide my hands, my heart, my mind, my mouth, my ears during this time as I lead to do well. And please allow full protection from the enemy that would stop any family member or any person that needs to hear this from hearing it. We ask you to protect us from distractions, disillusionment, disappointments, long enough to hear you, Father, in this time. Thank you for Higher Hopes Institute and my team, and the honor it is to work and to serve the families we get to serve. We love you, sweet Jesus. Amen. All right. So if you are leading a group, this would be a great time to do an icebreaker. That icebreaker would invite people that you're leading at this time. So if you're listening and you're hearing what your leader is going to do, we're going to do an icebreaker. And that icebreaker is going to be, as a group, you're going to share verbally. But if you are leading this or going through this alone and just processing on your own, your icebreaker is going to be a journaling activity. So if you don't already have a journal, if you don't have something to write on, stop the video and grab something to write on. So groups share verbally. Singles, solos, parents, couples who are leading this, grab a piece of paper or a journal. I suggest a journal because we're going to do a lot of work here together, writing and processing, because telling our story, the untold story never heals. So we want to make sure we're telling our story even to ourselves so that we get it out of us and we loosen it up so the Lord can do what he does best, which is heal. Right now, I'd like us to briefly share the one wound or discouragement that you continue to carry as a parent. There are details of our stories. There's the muck and the mess that our children have created in our lives. Maybe the muck and the mess that we created in our children's lives, and now it's just coming back to us to haunt us in a way. We're seeing our sins laid out before us, type thing. But I want you to really focus in on the one thing, the wound that you're carrying, the one thing that really sticks with you that you can't get unhooked from, but lingers at 4 a.m. in the morning when you wake up. The thing that that's the pinnacle of it all. That's the impetus of this entire thing. I would be fine with this, or I could even get through this if this one thing. What is the wound that you are hooked to, or that you carry around with you like a heavy, heavy piece of luggage around your heart? Go ahead and stop the video, discuss that amongst yourselves, or write it down in your journal what your wound is. Okay. Now that you've done that discussion and we've narrowed in on what that wound is, we want to remember that if we're in a group, we're going to establish a confidentiality clause here. We're going to say whatever happens in group stays in group. We need to not go home and share this with other people, even if we do so in a conversation talking about how group was and maybe even how helpful it was to find someone. We don't want to share what happens in group. We want to do so for the protection of our own hearts and those of the ones in our group with us. We also want to establish empathy for one another and safety. And even if you're doing this as a solo person or a set of parents, that safety comes from being in a space that you know that I can write this down on my journal and no one's going to read it, right? No one's going to come in and grab a hold of it and expose my secrets and my pain to the world. So we really want to establish confidentiality and safety within ourselves, but also within the group. So when we establish what that wound is, it's not going to be the only thing we focus on, but it's the thing that I know the Lord wants to free you from. I know that when my son strayed and began his lifestyle choices that aren't organized in our family and don't agree with how we thought we raised him, a lot of mine was embarrassment, fear, yes, fear that he would get into a situation that would take years to get out of. Fear, but embarrassment and maybe a little bit of shame, especially with who I am and what I've done in my community and all the investment I've made in my church and for Christ's name in my community and the values that I've upheld, maybe not perfectly, but I've tried to uphold in my community. I felt like it was all being snatched away by a young person's very naivety in the situation, but naive mindset about the long-term impact of his choices. So for me, it was shame and embarrassment. And I had to really unhook from that and realize that things needed to be done in spite of that. And the Lord showed up in that areas and worked in those areas inside of me to free me from that, to understand that I don't need to walk in shame. I need to walk in holiness and still be a parent. I'm still his authority. My husband, we are still authorities in our son's life until he takes a wife and becomes his own authority. And I'm still, as a good friend said, still the voice, the only female voice of true reason at this time in his life. And that holds power and truth. Of course, his father being a voice of reason, that patriarchal voice of reason, one who loves the Lord, we still have power that the Lord has given us in that space. And so he really worked through that. So I want to hand you one of God's promises that he is going to heal us. And it may not look like what we expected. It does not look like I expected or that I prayed, but the Lord is healing in new ways, unexpected ways that are so sweet and so precious as the Lord is. So right now, when our child goes astray, there is a lot of needing to understand the emotions, needing to understand the process and the shock of it all. I wrote down in my notes here the feelings of it all. So we're going to talk about our feelings and our emotions, but we really need to talk about as well as what constitute a wound in parenthood. Often it's disappointed expectations, rebellious children, relational fracture, all words I'm sure you're very accustomed to. And the common emotional responses to those are shame, guilt, self-blame. How did we get it wrong? How did we get here? Anger, because anger shows up to help us solve life's problems. That's why it can also be not a sin to anger. You know, we don't want to sin in our anger. That's why Jesus wasn't sinning when he solved the problem in the temple. But our anger can show up, and that anger, when not resolved or not healed or not processed, can turn into despair, despondency, disassociation, and in some ways, even divorcing ourselves from our children when they reject us. In this climate that we live in today, there is a whole generation of children who are divorcing their parents because of political differences, because of religious differences, because of understanding sexuality and gender differences. They're divorcing their parents and they're putting up such strong, they've heard about boundaries somewhere on a TikTok or a social media post somewhere. They learned about boundaries and they've gone to an extreme where they think that boundaries means keeping parents out and away. That's the only place to feel safe in my feelings or my thoughts or my beliefs. They don't understand that safety comes in groups and in understanding and strengthening your own voices and working through disagreements. They don't understand that that's how roots grow. So parents are divorcing children, and in response, a lot of parents are getting angry and despondent. The despair and just the depression is so deep that they're saying, fine, I'm done too, I'm out too. And really in return or in response, divorcing children as well. And some they come back in because they realize I didn't really mean that, but sometimes the damage has been done, especially when working with an immature or lesser mature person in your life, which children may often be. Not always, but may often be. I think the rule of thumb that we have to talk about here as we progress through this is that parents are called to be the mature ones. We are called to do this work. We are called to know how the Lord works through these ways. We are called to lead our children well. We are called to wander well in the desert so that our children can learn how to do it, even when it's them causing the pain. It's crucial that we wander well. It is crucial that we are the mature ones in this situation and we are not using immature, naive, or childish tactics or tendencies or our emotions to coerce, manipulate, or control the situation, because that does not heal. That just causes more tension. So let's talk about the feelings and responses of it all. The first thing that usually happens with a parent is the shock of the discovery, the shock of this is really going on. Even if we've been told and people have given us signs or in our gut instincts, we know something's off with our child. It's the actual moment of impact that shocks us. And that's when parents discover that their child has gone astray morally, spiritually, there's often emotional injury there, and that injury can be deep and painful. And these situations happen more often than we realize. There are a lot of very hurt, very wounded parents walking around this earth, and especially walking around our churches. So this workshop together that we're doing, it's not, you're not alone in this. It's just a big, huge pandemic of sorts that we cover up because of our shame and our embarrassment. Not in my family. It's not supposed to happen. What does it mean for my walk and our witness in our community if my child has gone astray? And sometimes our children do it in a very quiet and discreet way. Some of us get lucky, right? Nobody knows. And sometimes it's a very public manner of display. That sin is out there for all to see. They use their own social media, or the community that you live in is small and gossip runs rampant and wild. So with these situations, though they are common, the details vary and are unique to each family. In one family, it might involve drug abuse. Another might be a felony or a misdemeanor, some criminal activity, alcohol abuse, substance abuse, might be homosexuality, premarital sex, and others arrest or prison time. chronic dishonesty. It may be political division in the family. Um, we might have a runaway. We might have someone who brings someone into the home. There can be a myriad of different situations for families and for parents. So though it is common, it is unique to you and your perspective. So it's important that we do tell our stories and we do share our pain, while still, especially if you're in a group setting right now, still processing that pain together so that everyone is heard and they know I am not alone, though my details are different. The second experience, not only is it the shock of this of the details and the shock of the sin, or the shock, the surprise, of it all, is actually being taken by surprise. And this is common in parents who have been loyal to the highest moral and religious views. You know, you're walking consistently with the Lord, you're serving in church, your family does all the things you're supposed to do, and then the discovery that comes along, this what did I call it? The shock of discovery turns into this discovery that the child has decided to break with one or more of those family values, and that comes as a total surprise. And it can be a surprise that when the story comes out, um, it's often the parents' case to assume that someone else did the influencing. This can't be my child. This can't be their rebellion. Someone else participated in this. And then that leads us to this concept of what's called moral kidnapping, as if our child has been kidnapped by some sinful person that is forcing them to do these things. That the enemy is out there somewhere. That's what Guy Greenfield calls in his book. The enemy is out there somewhere. And instead of really seeing that enemy territory includes your child, and your child is actively participating in it because they are choosing it. It's a very hard thing. So we have to start recognizing that this moral kidnapping, where parents can carelessly blame outsiders of the home environment for when their child goes astray, which is a natural response. It happens. We don't want to believe the worst about our family members. But the mature thing to do is to back up that train and say, okay, I can see that my son or my child, my son or my daughter, they are actually enjoying this. This is their lifestyle. They are choosing this. Even if it's unhealthy for them, they're doing it because they're getting something from it. So they're staying in it. So then the next step is it's often like less painful to make it someone else's fault, because if it's someone else's fault, it can't be your child's fault, and that pain can be easier to bear. But I'm telling you, if you will face the facts and face the truth, you will usher in a season of truth, because the truth sets us free. You'll usher in a season of truth that will help your heart be held in a way it won't be held if you deny, stuff down, or pretend that things are not really going on right in front of your nose. After this is where we start to fight for the recovery. This is where we start to fix it all, right? So this is where problems can be compounded, one over another, because we're so desperate to morally recover our kidnapped child that we begin to fight for recovery in the wrong ways, because we're going to fight the friends. We're going to restrict our child from seeing those people. We're going to say, you can't have access to my child anymore. So what happens is, when we're fighting for the recovery of our morally kidnapped child, we actually drive the child further away. We miss the actual mark of what's going on in our child and their choices and the responsibility they have. And those scars remain for a very long time because we have missed the mark as the authority, the God-given authority in these children's lives, to state, hey, you're making some choices and we need to discuss these openly, so we can better understand where you're coming from and we can make decisions as parents. So right now, I'd like you to take a moment and just take a break and think about, discuss, and or write down, depending on if you're in a group or you're by yourselves, what ways and what did that initial shock look like for you? How did you engage in moral kidnapping mindset? And how did you begin to fight for that recovery? So I want you to talk about or write down that shock, the surprise of it all. What was the moment that you thought, this is not happening? Who did you blame for that moral kidnapping? And how did you begin fighting for recovery, even if it was unhealthy? Because we're not talking about healthy recovery right now. We're talking about fighting for recovery in the way that we often do, to try to fix it all, cover it all up, those kinds of things, in the inadequate ways of fighting for recovery. So I want to go ahead and just have you take a break for a moment, pause the video, come right back. I'll be here waiting to go on to the next phase to kind of reflect upon what you've discussed and what you've written. Okay, here we are. We're back. Thank you so much. The first thing we're going to talk about that I want you to reflect from whatever you just discussed or you wrote down, I want you to go through these next steps with me and have you think through the ways that you participated in these activities. Often we have this knee-jerk reaction, which is the initial cover-up. Cover-ups usually close the door on sympathetic understanding and the emotional support in times of distress. When we begin to cover up the sins of our family members and the sins of going on in our own lives, what happens is we then block the access and block the blessing for people in our lives who love the Lord to be a part of this journey with us. When we open up our hearts to deacons, church members, friends, spiritual sisters and brothers in the faith, the response is often one of genuine care and support. Not everyone has that experience. I understand. Some of you may have tried to open up and maybe you were shunned from your church, and I'm sorry for that. That's not what should have happened. You should have been carried along. I pray that you find a church community, a blessed community that walks with you in these hard moments. Sharing pain brings healing, though. And like author Mary DeMuth says, the untold story never heals. It's important that we don't cover up what is going on in our family. Now, that doesn't mean you share it with everyone. I don't think you grab the mic on Sunday and tell everyone what's going on. These have to be safe people who will walk with you, people that you've seen are tested and approved and walk with the Lord, people who maybe are seasoned enough to have walked through this with their own children so they understand intimately the pain and they don't play the blame game or the you know what you should do game. That's the problem. Have you tried? You know what you should do? Because here's the deal, folks. We are not here to fix the children. That is not the purpose of this. We want our children fixed. We want them healthy. We want them walking with the Lord, but that's not our job. That's the job of the Lord. So our job is to minister to one another, to carry one another through this pain, to let one another know that we're not alone, to be the hands of Jesus in this time, which is, you will never be alone. I shall never forsake you. We need to live that out right now. I pray that you have a church family that does that. If you do not, I pray you find one. But it's important that you also ask yourself at this time when you're going to stop covering up, what was needed? What is needed? What does my heart need right now? So that you can also explain that as well. It's important that we don't cover up, but often we do involve ourselves in the initial cover up. So take a moment, either in discussion or quiet reflection. What was the initial cover up for you? Did you dismiss it? Did you pretend like it wasn't there? Did you only tell certain people, but not tell other people that you knew would help you? Did you cover up at all? If you did, feel free to share that within the group. But if you decide to do this as quiet reflection as a group leader or just in your journals, take a moment to walk yourself through that and really talk yourself through the story that happened and when you began covering up. And maybe you're still covering up now. Maybe this is the first time you've actually revealed this part of your story. The next section I'd like to talk about is when we resent the peer group's victory. We feel like the peer group, especially whether it's a political group, the boyfriend that or the girlfriend that takes them away, or that actual group of friends, we feel like they've had a victory. And what happens is we're placing blame on the wrong element or not taking an accurate view. That goes back to that moral kidnapping that we talked about. We end up resenting the peer group's victory and we draw a line in the sand, which we should have boundaries and we should draw a line in the sand. But the problem is our initial reaction is to deeply resent the group or the person we think brought this into our space. How is it possible? Guy Grinfield asks, how is it possible for a small group of teenagers to undo in a few months what it's taken parents years to build? Where does a peer group get its power to reverse a youth's entire value system? The peer group often becomes the enemy, and often parents who are wounded feel like the enemy has won. So where does this happen? Well, let me explain it to you. There are different developmental phases that happen in a person's life. And a teenager should not think like they did when they were 5 and 6. When they're 4, 5, and 6, they look up to mom and dad. They should absolutely believe that you hang the moon. They should think that you're kings and queens of the castle and that they hang on every, well, even if they don't like the chores, they like the things, they hang on every syllable because you are the authority. But then this wonderful thing called puberty comes along. And right when the concrete thinking is absolutely out of the brain, and now we're in abstract thinking and we're understanding things like friendship and crushes and algebra, all these abstract things start to make sense in the brain. It's also the time that emotionally and developmentally, the voice of the parents starts to diminish and the voice of the peers starts to increase. This is because God allows people to become autonomous, to grow up, and to become attracted to other people, to marry them, make babies with them, and perpetuate the human race. Because if this didn't happen, the human race would die. It's basic biology, it's basic anthropology. It's important that we understand that when our child, maybe you put them in choir and they loved singing because that extrinsic affirmation they got from you was, oh my gosh, you're so good. I love hearing you sing. But now they've decided, I don't want to sing in the choir anymore. I don't like singing. I don't want to play soccer. I don't want to do this. I want to be in a rock band. I want to wear dark eyeliner and black lipstick and paint my fingernails black because that's how I'm identifying myself with my peer group. Those moments of autonomy are important in a child's life because they are becoming their new self. They're becoming the adult version of themselves and they're right on target. The problem is that when they stray from our values, there's moral wounding that takes place within the parent, and there's sin wounding that takes place, usually on both sides, as parents end up sinning in this part of the program that they're in. But they're watching their child sin as well and making choices and doing things that they wouldn't necessarily agree with. But they are developmentally where they're supposed to be. So when you're asking yourself, how does this happen? This is it. This is it. The peer group's voice becomes important because it's supposed to, because they're supposed to walk this out with friends. They're supposed to walk out their walk of faith with a wife or a husband someday, and their own peer group and their own children, their own families. They actually are in target. The problem is that the peers' voices become so loud, it often drowns out or completely nullifies the voice of parents or the voice of reason or the voice of healthy, godly, holy authority in their lives. This can leave you baffled and confused. How can this happen to us? What did we do wrong? What made my child do this? Where did we screw up? Is the big question that we often begin to ask ourselves. Parents often feel that they're doing their best under these circumstances when they rear their children, because it's not easy being parents today. And we feel like we're doing our best, but then something like this happens and tells us, nope, you did it all wrong. You messed it all up. And that's a really confusing space to be in because we often will feel like, had I not done this, this wouldn't have happened. And we'll lay in bed at night, or even when we're working and doing other things, it's just circling around in our brain. Where did we go wrong? How did we do this? I think there is some natural reflection that needs to take place in this process, and we will do that. But we also need to understand that we don't need to take on parts of this that are not ours. Asking for forgiveness for sins you didn't commit doesn't make sense. So you really have to get a lay of the land and understand the accurate view of your role in this, your contribution to it, and the things you did not contribute to. Because we have to understand that there's a child involved and there is a peer group and there are influences. There are influences there, but they're not all ours, and it's not all ours to take on. We also don't give our children the due consequences. We often become enablers when we take on parts of this that we don't belong taking on. So it's very important that you establish in your own mind what parts of this were ours and what parts of this were not. We are blindly inconsistent. We often ask ourselves, did we say one thing or do another? Were we short on love, short on discipline, short on communication of our values and religious convictions? And in the midst of defeat, we rarely have no insight to know. So here we are, we're confused, we're puzzled, we have no solid answers, and maybe there aren't any. Maybe we'll never know for sure. Maybe clarity will come, maybe family therapy will help, but sometimes we don't get the answers that we want. So we still have to go on. But the next big question that we often ask ourselves is, where was God? Where was God? Why does he keep letting this happen? Why won't he stop this? Why did he let us down? Now, some of you might say, I'll never ask that of God. He can never let me down. But you might ask, where were you? Are you listening, God? Where are your promises now? Why do I go to bed scared every night, barely sleeping, barely functioning, barely getting up in the morning, not knowing how to converse with my child, not even know if my child will ever speak to me again? When we get to this place, parents who have honestly tried to rear their children in a Christian home where there was church involvement is considered natural, where Bible reading and prayer is much a part of the family system as behavioral things like eating and sleeping, where love and discipline were well balanced. Parents have a difficult time when one child decides, in both words and actions, to leave the Christian faith or to leave the things that we hold dear behind. They can honestly feel betrayed by God. And it's part of this reality check that we need to have these conversations with ourselves and say what we're truly feeling. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to wrestle these things out with the Lord because we're afraid of saying the truth, as if we have a God that doesn't know it or a God that can't take it. But we are called to wrestle with the Lord. So if you're having these feelings of despair towards the Lord, where you don't understand where He is, or you feel betrayed in this process, like you've been consistently serving Him, and yet here you are, A, you're not alone. You're not alone. And B, it's okay. It's okay to have these feelings. Now, what we do in those feelings, I always say all emotions and feelings are welcome, but not all behaviors and choices are. So right now we choose our behaviors and our choices well. We have to choose them well so that we can take our hearts to the Lord. Feeling betrayed by God can also make us wonder, where was He? And is He ever going to show up for us again? So we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't feel His arms of comfort. We don't feel His sovereignty. And we can't make it a praise the Lord situation when our hearts are so broken, especially with the loss of a child. Either the loss of a child that is still living, that we're waiting, a prodigal child, we're waiting to come back, or the actual loss of our child in which we will never see again. That is a very, very hard space. And many people have walked away from the church and walked away from the Lord because of that betrayal sense. How do we understand that He's sovereign? How do we believe that in these circumstances? How do we invest any more time and energy when we're barely able to pick ourselves up emotionally? How do we even utter a prayer? How do we even say the words, "How long, Lord," when we don't even know if He's listening? These are true feelings. This is a real experience that you're having. The first thing we need to do is we need to ask for help. The big question is from whom, how much, and other baffling questions. So when your son or daughter has gone astray, one of the worst things you can do is pull into your shell. We want to. You can pull in for a little while and you can soothe yourself, but it has to be with the intent of actually soothing yourself, because you've got to come back out of that shell. We need to believe that such problems are not so personal that they're not someone else's business. You don't make them everyone's business. You don't share information with the general public, because that's not protecting or guarding your heart either. But we do need to understand that sometimes we can't handle our own problems, and it is okay to get help. Some people don't have a network that is safe, so they might get professional help. They might even go outside of their circle altogether. They might drive to another town for therapy, or go visit with a pastor from a church they've known from a long time ago. We learn from our culture that we are supposed to be able to stand up on our own 2 feet. This attitude is like the Superman or Wonder Woman concepts, but the problem is that when we have this concept of ourselves, we have an unrealistic view of ourselves. And it's quite frankly stupid, because we're not called to be perfect. The Lord has said it 1,000 times over in His word. There is only one perfect being, and it isn't us. So there are no super people, including Christians, and definitely wounded parents. When you feel like your family has been torpedoed by life and you need help, asking for help, although a very difficult first step, is the very most important first movement forward in recovery and in releasing this pain and the travesty to be held by others and carried by others. To ask for help is to not only acknowledge our humanity, but also to begin to desire healing processes in our life. And if you notice, I say processes and not process, because it's not a one and done. We're not going to go through this book and get to the end and be like, "Oh, that's good. Oh, Erin gave us her notes. Oh, Erin gave us her curriculum. I feel better." No, there's still going to be pain on the other side of this. I don't know how long you're going to journey on this path. That's why it's processes. It's processes of forgiveness, processes of release, processes of relearning our faith. So that takes us to the next section, which is our need for patience. So before we get to our set of questions I have for you, I want you to think about ways that you have been impatient with yourself, your child, your spouse, your circumstances. We want sudden recovery, instant healing, quick solutions. Those are traits in a broken world. But in a healed, mature, faithful world, we understand that it's a cadence to the healing, that in the Lord's timing, it is not like ours. And it is often slower. Sometimes it's a long road we do not see around the bends, and sometimes we can see the goal but we have to stay due north. Whatever your journey is, we need to have patience. And we need to understand how to have patience with ourselves, how to have patience with the Lord, how to have patience with our spouses, and how to, of course, have patience with our children. So I have some discussion and journaling questions for you. And I'd like you to, at the end of this section, go ahead and stop the video. I'll come back on and talk about our next section in this session. But these questions, I would like you to take some time to process, either verbally or in your journal. And you can divide this up into 2 classes if you'd like at this time. This would be a great time if you're leading a group to go ahead and stop and follow through with the questions. Maybe come back next week and review some of the things that you talked about or reflected upon between your time together or whenever you have your next meeting. And then do the second part. So this could be a part A and a part B, or you can go on through depending how you've set this up. But if you are doing this one-on-one, of course, whatever fits your schedule best, however much time you have for each of these parts. Stop and start. First question, what were your emotions when you first discovered one of your what your child or one of your children was going astray? I'm going to ask that again, and I will provide these questions in written form. What were your emotions when you first discovered one of your children or child was going astray? Number 2, can you talk about your family situation with a small circle of friends from your church? And if not, why not? If so, how so? How do you speak about it? Are you blatantly honest? Do you hold things back? Do you share with only a certain type of person or a certain group? What makes them that blessed group that you're able to share with, or the group that you're blessed by, rather? Number 3, why does being a parent seem so difficult today? Why is it so hard? What do you think's happened socially, economically, through the decades, generationally? Why does being a parent seem so difficult today? Number 4, do you feel that God has failed you? Do you feel that God has failed your family situation? If so, can you describe your attitude to yourself or to someone else? Can you really put your heart out there and say, this is how I'm truly feeling towards God right now? And can you do it without shame and do it knowing that the Lord is listening right there? He is literally sitting there right there with you as you are sharing this, because there's no place we can hide, even when we're angry. So please, like I said, I've provided these questions for you. You're welcome to print them out or just stop and start. Work these through as a group or on your own, and I'll see you in section B in just a moment. Okay, we're back again for section B. This section is called the Shattered Dreams section. And this is the woulds, the shoulds, and the coulds. And this is how we begin processing. You know, as we look through our children's lives and we tell the story of their lives, there are years of fulfillment, years that make us happy to be parents. Everything's so joyful. And then things can take a turn. It can be a slow decline, a slow spiral, where we might see early signs of rebellion or rejection. Mind you, I'm going to use both rejection and rebellion often because I think the experience is not the same, although they can run, together, but they also can be separate for parents. It seems that there can be two misdirections a child can go of cutting the cords. One is that a child cuts the cord too fast, takes off early out of college, or breaks away early. And so they're not ready, really, morally, physically, emotionally, financially, maturity wise. They're not ready. So they can, this could be a stubborn, rebellious child, someone who breaks the cords too easily and breaks away, thinking they know better. I think we've all known children like that, whether they're ours or not. This process would be a lot like a student pilot being set up on his first solo flight so soon that he would probably end his flight career earlier than expected because he wouldn't have all the tools to fly the machine. The second possible misdirection is for parents to resist cutting the cords, to hold on as long as possible, to produce either a rebellious child or both the nature and culture to tell him or her to cut the cords. Well, let me say this. We might produce an anxious child or a dependent child that is unready. So then when it is actually time for them to cut the cords, they're not really maturity wise ready. So you might have these two situations. This might come through rejection and rebellion. It can come in different ways, but they often, well, not often, in both times, you feel like you've lost control. In both scenarios, we feel like we've lost control, no matter what the situation. So these expressions of growing up, of rebellion, can feel so acute and so painful for a parent because as a child is achieving independence and self-confidence, they're also achieving other sinful patterns or other behaviors alongside that that often is intertwined and it's hard to separate them out. So then we feel like we've lost control. We respond with harshness and anger, disappointment, disapproval, and then obviously the next phase comes, which is often the invasion by the peer group or the boyfriend or girlfriend or the other person influencing it. It's not very often that a child rejects a parent solely on their own. So I'm not going to reflect much or at all in this workshop about the child that might leave on their own because I think there are probably underlying issues there that are not to what we're addressing here. So this is really the child who is rejecting, and there is some kind of outside influence politically. So in a big social group, in a small peer group, or with a person, maybe a love interest, or someone they've made a relationship with, more physical in nature, whatnot. So then we have this invasion by the peer group, and we need to understand in this day's climate, it is not just friends, it's society, it's the media, it's social media. We have children at home in their basements on video games, have never even seen the friends that they call their peer group, but are completely being influenced by the things that they are being fed into their ears. And then also when they're scrolling on their technology, all of these videos, they're not doing any research, they have no backup for the content they're being given, but they're holding true to it as if it is truth, and then they're carrying it through as their new Bible for their life. So the invasion of that peer group may not be the kids that they went to middle school with. It may not be guys on the high school football team. It might actually be people you've never seen or they've never seen, which is so strange for us older folks to even conceptualize not having connection or physical contact or proximity to our peer group, but it is a very, very big problem these days. So the problem is with the peer group comes up and represents its values and a lifestyle sharply opposed to what we believe, and it's in conflict with one's family. This peer group tends to emerge around junior high, but not always. Sometimes kids can have a little bit later development around these areas, and so it can show up shockingly around junior, senior year, or when they go off to college. A lot of parents are using the words indoctrination as if they've sent their children off and they've been indoctrinated by someone else. And that is the case in some universities. So you can send them away thinking they're going to get a great education, and they come home completely unknowing and not really able to recognize your child in a lot of ways. So that can be very scary because it's a night and day experience. There can be counter influences that are slow and subtle. So it can be television, social media, things like that. And the effect of these things on a child's life has no doubt been tremendous on their lives. I do heartily suggest that if you have any younger children in the home, you rethink their social media and their content consumption. It is a rampant problem. So then the next thing that happens is we recognize the rebellion. The rebellion is now on the scene and our dreams begin to disintegrate. When our dreams begin to disintegrate, it's where the fear really starts to creep in and where we start having not only anger towards the behavior and some fears, but this is where it becomes very anxiety ridden, maybe even depression and paranoia around the child's behaviors because we feel like this entire life is fought. We're grasping at it, we're trying to hold on to it, and it is slipping through our fingers at a pace that we can't even fathom. So when our dreams begin to disintegrate, that's when we have strange feelings and emotions in this time. Before we get to the strange feelings and emotions and the dichotomies that we live in, I'd like you to stop the video right now and I'd like you to talk through the things that we just discussed. What were the early signs of rebellion? Actually, go back even one step further. I'd like you to talk about the years of fulfillment. There's a reason we're fighting for these children because we loved them and we like them at one point. I mean, we'll always love them, but we actually had feelings of affection towards them. Some of our feelings of affection can be gone when we're in pain, but there were times when we really, really liked them and we wanted to be around. They looked up to us and we just gazed upon them with so much love and adoration. I want you to talk about the early signs of rebellion. Did you turn a blind eye? Did you enable? Did you think, not my kid? When a teacher called to tell you that there was something going on in the classroom, did you lambast or shun the teacher when you should have stopped and said, wow, I'm on your team. Let's figure out how to help my child best. These are the moments we really have to start processing through. Did we reflect our own teen years or middle school years onto our child? And because maybe we were a little more innocent, um, maybe we weren't innocent at all, but because we didn't see our child doing certain things that we did, we thought, oh no, they can't be in any trouble. Even though we sensed the rebellion, we sensed the breakaway, we didn't actually face it or pay attention to it. We need to discuss that. So please take a moment, write in your journal, talk amongst yourselves. What did those signs of rebellion look like? Talk about the fulfillment and those great years and how you came to love your child and what's so fantastic about them. And then let's talk about the early signs of rebellion. When you come out of that, I want you to talk about the early or the invasion by the peer group. What did that look like? We talked a little bit about that last week, and you may have already discussed that as a group, but I'd like you to repeat that or just kind of get the idea of how did that invasion come to be and how did you understand that as a parent? Talk about the counter influences, the involvement of social media, technology, gaming, isolation, sports teams, peer groups, boyfriends, girlfriends. Talk about those things. What influences were in your child's life? How did you participate towards them? How did this slipping through the fingers happen in your situation? Take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Okay. We're moving on to when the green dreams began to disintegrate section, and I'm smiling, but it's not a funny topic at all. The problem is that when those dreams begin to disintegrate, there's a lot you don't know. And that's the hard part. Often children will lie to us, thwart the truth, skirt the truth, just blatantly not tell you the truth, refuse to speak to you about the truth. So you have these intelligent, curious kids that are inquisitive and they're so much fun. And all of a sudden, distrust forms because you can't get a straight answer. They know that their experimentation with life is going to be rejected, so they learn to be coercive with that information. They learn to manipulate to get what they want. They know that if their parents knew everything that they did, that they would be punished or they would risk losing the chance at the behavior. This is that pinnacle where we start thinking about there's a lot I didn't know. And we do some assuming on this part because the child will not tell you everything. But this is where we kind of pair that up with the understanding what did I enable and or ignore that was going on. Because instead of facing the consequences, we choose to hide the facts to ourselves, or we even sometimes keep the child's secret, sometimes even from the other parent. Don't tell your father, I won't tell your mother. So that we're not being honest in the home. We're not dealing with things as a family. We didn't deal with things as a family, and or we didn't ever believe our child could do this or be involved in this, even if our gut instinct said something was off, something doesn't feel right. We ignore it. They're being deceitful. We're enabling or we're ignoring, and it just makes the perfect storm. And what happens is the shattering and the trauma of that shattering. When we get to that place, the way that we often describe is that it hurts, it's hard, it's debilitating. We feel like a total parental failure. We don't even know, will there ever be hope again? And the other big question is, do we dare to even dream that our kids will be okay again? What happens if we dream? What happens if we hope? Will those dreams be shattered again? Is this ever going to be not part of our life? Is that boyfriend or girlfriend ever going to be gone? Are they going to marry that person? Are they going to make a life with it? Is this going to be my in-law? My in-law, but my child-in-law? Is this peer group going to influence my child for the rest of their life? How they vote, where they live, how they dress, what kind of jobs they take, if they even take jobs? Is this peer group going to be their drug addiction group, their substance abuse group? There's so many things that we dare to even dream again. We don't even want to hope again because we're so afraid of what hoping or dreaming and sometimes even praying for those things could mean to our hearts because of the trauma that we're enduring or that we have endured. Things may get worse before they get better. You're going to need to have a lot of patience. You may need to radically change your usual approach to your child. He or she may not be going through the same change and growth that you're trying to go through right now. They might be testing out new lifestyles, new mindsets, new philosophies. There may be days when you feel like you just can't take it any longer. And a day when maybe your son is sentenced by court or your daughter is suspended from school, a day that they lose their senior year privileges or they come home with a pregnancy test. It may be days when you feel like you just cannot take it anymore. And you need to know that if your situation gets worse before it gets better, it can get better, and it will. Maybe not fixed like you think, but you can get better in this and you can feel healed. So I have some questions for you for your discussion to end this first workshop that I'm leading, whether this is broken up into multiple parts or not. This is still session one from my contribution here. The questions for discussion here for your journal or together are, can you describe the early hopes and dreams you had pertaining to your child's future? I asked you to talk to me about the things, or to talk to each other or yourselves about the things that made you love your child and adore your children. But I also want you to now think, can you describe the early hopes and dreams you had pertaining to your child's future? What did you think they were going to grow up and be? What did you want them to do that they've broken away from? What did you know they'd be so good at if they just get their head out of the ground and pay attention to their own talents? What were some of the early signs of your children's rebellion or your child's rebellion? Are there any uncut cord people in your family? People where maybe another child that is holding on too long, or an early cut person, maybe a child that you let go too fast. I understand the too early. We sent our son overseas to work on the mission field in our home at 18 years old, 18 and a half, turned 19 over there. It was too early. It was too early, and he was influenced by forces we didn't know we're not people that we would have hung out with. We weren't even aware that certain behaviors and certain things were taking place, certain old school mindsets that we were not aware of in former East Germany. We knew the mindsets, but we didn't realize they were still prevalent. And so he came home with some very different philosophies about things. And well, we're still on some of that journey, and still praying for him for clarity and that the Lord would speak to his heart and lead him back to where the Lord has called him to be. We cut the cords a little too early for him. We thought it was the best thing to send a young man out into the world, and we realize now he was not maturity and spiritually ready for that. He wasn't strong enough. And he thought he was strong enough. We thought he was strong enough. We all made the mistake together. But now looking back, we would have done things differently. So asking yourself, did we cut the cord too early, or are we still holding on, maybe even for our own sake? Matt Walsh has a famous speech he gave at a homeschool conference I happened to be at, where he walked in, sat down, and told people, "You don't love your children." And it was shocking, but it was a great speech because he said, if you are more concerned with how you feel about your children's behavior and how your pain or your heart about how you're going to feel and bringing in discipline and whatnot, then you don't love your children. You love yourself, and you're not loving them the way God's called you to, because love is sacrificial. And it's a hard thing to hear, but some of us are more concerned of not hurting. We want to be our child's friend. We don't want our child to fight with us. We don't want our child to reject us. So we don't do what we're called to do in this process. And that's something that, if that's the case, you've got to wrestle with it. And it's okay. You're not alone. Millions of parents have done that. It's either one or the other on the too early cut or the uncut cords altogether. Every human who is a parent is going to find themselves in that camp somewhere. Why is the peer, next question, number 4. Why is the peer group such a powerful influence in your child's life? Are there any Christian peer groups in your church? Can they even be created? If they're not. Number 5, what would you do if you found something illegal or morally objectionable in your child's bedroom or belongings? What's your response going to be? Will you cover up? Will you enable? Will you involve the authorities? Will you bring it to the other parent, whether you're divorced and parenting this child together? How will you handle this? Number 6, how can parents prevent lying and distrust on the part of their children? I don't know that we can, but it's worth a discussion. Number 7, should wounded parents dare to dream again, or should you be realistic and just accept what comes? I'd love to hear your responses. My thoughts to that is that it's a balance between the two. I think there's a lot of reality bite that needs to be taken, but it's okay to dare to hope, because Jesus came to give us a hope for a future. But I'd love for you to discuss that with yourselves, to write that out and work those questions through. I'll see you in session 2. I'll be praying for you while you do this work. This may bring up some wounds and some pain, some hard things. You may find yourself needing to cry. You may find yourself clenching your fist to the heavens and asking the Lord, how long? Why? That's okay. Cry out to the Lord. It is okay to share that pain with someone. It is okay to say it into the heavens, because the Lord and all of his heavenly hosts are there to hold, to catch, to honor and hold space for that, and to become sovereign in your life in this time and in this pain. So if you feel emotions rising, please don't hold them in. And remember, anger shows up to help us solve life's problems. So if anger is the emotion you have, try to get down to the root, because C.S. Lewis said it best. I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her name was grief. I'll close with that, and I'll see you in session 2. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.